Welcome back to to Profit at Night. iGate has finally bought out the promoter's stake in Patni, and for a deal that is valued at about $1.2 billion for the whole company. What impact will this have on the IT sector, and why are promoters looking to sell out? To discuss this, we're joined by Atul Nishar. He's the chairman of Hexaware Technologies, and Milan Sheth. He's a partner business advisory services at Ernst & Young. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen. Atul, to you first. Small and mid-sized IT companies have for a while now been feeling the pinch. There is high staff attrition, wages are going up, demand has been somewhat weak because of the slowdown in some of the big European and Western markets. So are we going to see increasingly founders say, well, may not be a bad time to sell out and become part of a large company because scale is the only way to survive?
Anjana, firstly, let me make a point that one swallow does not make a summer. The large shareholders of Patni have been wanting to sell their stake for a very long time. It's already, I think, 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't think this represents any trend as such. It's an individual decision. Secondly, you mentioned about the hard times or business not doing well. It's on the contrary, the business is looking up very well. As you can see in the recent quarters, technology has looked up very well. My own company Hexaware has grown double-digit quarter on quarter for 2 consecutive quarters, and the next year also the growth is looking good. The margins are expanding. So I don't think the promoters have any concern. Thirdly, you referred to small mid-sized company. Patni at 700 million revenue can be called at the higher end of mid-sized company, and they've been doing quite well. I think it's a decision of individual shareholders more than anything else.
Okay. Fair enough. Milan, do you see this increasingly as a trend? You know, we've seen several founders exit recently. There was a Reckitt Benckiser Paris deal recently. There was the Inam deal. Of course, the trend was started, some years ago when Ranbaxy sold out to Daiichi, and people said, well, you can't sell the family jewels. But it seems that investors or founders now are less hesitant, so to speak, to let go of firms that they founded and nurtured. Increasingly, are we going to see this as a trend?
Yeah, so let me answer it slightly differently. The way Atul said, this is a promoter decision, and I completely agree with him that promoters decide at various points in the life cycle of the companies whether to dilute, whether to get a strategic investor, or whether to completely move out. I think the point which I would really kind of pick it up from for a mid-sized companies in India is their ability to specialize in domain or a geography, or offer what, let's say, a large-scale player cannot offer. And that's the area where I clearly think that many of the promoters would try to move their organization in that direction. To answer your other question, in terms of our promoters in India diluting, and is that a trend which we see? Honestly, it's I don't know about that, because if you really look at the investment which we are attracting in variety of sectors, from private equity or from strategic investors overseas, clearly where promoters try hard to retain their stake and only leverage only to get additional funds. So difficult to comment whether it is a trend where mid-sized companies would dilute, but clearly from an IT services perspective, I would think it just gives added focus for mid-sized companies to start specializing in domain or specializing in servicing certain geographies.
Right. Atul, from your point of view, is this an attractive deal for Patni shareholders? Are they going to be, for example, the open offer, which is really only 10% premium? Is that something that they'll likely bite?
Firstly, I think for iGate, this is an attractive deal. If you look at the valuation, it comes to only 10 times EBIT net of cash, or 2 times revenue or 2 times book. So this is a good deal for iGate. The premium is not high also because this deal has been in use for quite some time and it is substantially discounted in the price. But even then I would say that particularly when market is looking up quite well, I would have expected the deal at a higher valuation than what has been done.
Right, Milan, you mentioned that small mid-cap companies develop their niche and then they get good business. But what is it that stops them from gaining the scale that they want to perhaps increase in size? Is it financial constraints? Is it managerial constraints? Do they lose out to bigger MNCs in the same field then?
Well, I think, if you really look at the several mid-sized companies, again, I think Atul referred earlier in terms of margins expanding. So clearly, we all recognize that compared to larger peer and larger companies, mid-sized companies tend to have the lower margin in what business they operate in. Having said that, I think the other challenge obviously is in terms of scaling up in multiple geographies, multiple solutions. And I think it's quite a contradictory or a paradox in a way that mid-sized companies they specialize in something and they try to service that particular market or a solution to the client. So in their life cycle, at a point they need to decide whether they have built sufficient capacities as well as capabilities to go and grow bigger, or they continue to stay a niche player and continue to either go for a higher profitable growth. So if you really kind of look at it, it's a quite a paradox for a company which is 500 million to 750 million kind of a size, whether they want to offer all services to all geographies to all type of customers, or whether they just pick a certain niche which they believe would give them a profitable growth.
Right, Mr. Nishar, do you see any significant integration challenges between, there's no merger as of now, but in the future something could happen like that between iGate and Patni? Are there integration challenges? Are there overlaps between the two companies?
Well, I think the most important factor in the success of any acquisition is ability to integrate in time and successfully. I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for iGate. While the iGate management under the leadership of Fanish Murthy is capable, but even then one cannot underestimate the challenge. Patni is a significantly larger company than iGate, and ability to integrate this successfully will really decide the future course for iGate. I mean, from $250 million revenue, it's becoming a $950 million revenue company. And whether this acquisition will help it gain the momentum in growth, or it just adds up to the number. That's the really difference between a success and not a great success in an acquisition.
Right. Atul, one more quick question. You have these companies listed on two bosses. Is it going to be more sensible for them in the long term to just stick to one boss?
Yeah, I think it does get complex having two listing, but it's not easy to delist in India. Since iGate has primary listing in the US, then it would only mean Patni getting delisted, and I think in India that's a tougher task, so that may not easily happen. But can I also add a point to what Milan just mentioned on the need for a mid-sized company to be a niche player? If you look at my own company, Hexaware example, we are a multi-niche company. And it is very important to specialize in certain niche verticals or horizontals to be able to compete effectively with scale players. So a generalist, a jack of all, will find it difficult in the changing times to sustain the growth. So I believe that companies, mid-sized companies that are focused, that are niche players, will continue to grow well, and it is not just a question of scale. We've seen the example of much larger companies, say EDS, a $10 billion company got acquired. So is it only that a mid-sized company has the risk? Any company of any scale can get acquired. So I think mid-sized companies with proper focus have a bright future and will continue to grow.
Right. Having said that, Atul, like you mentioned, in Patni's case, the talk's been going on for about 3 years. We've heard about how the brothers wanted to sell out. Has that thought ever occurred to you that you would like to exit the business?
Oh, well, you look at Hexaware, we have been growing so well. The future is looking very bright. And I believe I'm young. So that thought doesn't come to our mind.
Right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.